Hey all, as I've been doing a bit of preparation on my own LT230 case, including the clearancing of the main case for fitting of MaxiDrive low range gear sets, in particular for this one it's a 30% reduction low range. I thought I'd show what's involved, how I went about doing it, just to help a few people out if possible. The instruction manual is pretty clear and very easy to follow. This is just sort of a visual representation. So the gear set itself is a bigger diameter than the factory low range gear, and the other issue with assembly, as I've shown in my other videos, is it does not pass through the normal hole to assemble. So the main thing here is we have to clearance the case, because that will not turn. It'll rub on certain parts of the case and you can't install it and you can't run it. So the gear itself is concentric to this hole, which is great. That makes things a lot easier. The hole is about 170 millimeters diameter from memory, and this gear set's about 180. So that means it's 5 mil bigger all the way around. So at the very least, you would be removing 5 mil. You want to remove a little bit more than that because you need clearance for it to run, thermal expansions, the oil. You don't want it being such a tight fit, even though it spins, that the oil creates friction and then a problem. So I'm pretty sure the manual states a minimum of 1 millimeter. What I did was I had a little packer that happened to be 6.5 millimeters thick, and I used that as a gauge under here in relation to this wall here, wherever the high spots where I use this little packer. So 5 mil needs to be removed just to fit the gear, plus our 1.5 mil for clearance. So the 6.5 mil packer that I had, a little material, was a great little gauge to give me a good indication of how much I had to remove. What we need to remove is, on some of these 8 mil M8 threaded holes, some of them are just through holes that just go straight through with nothing underneath, and some of them you can see the remnants of this one have the boss cast down, and it's a blind hole rather than a through hole. They stick down and are in the way, and then there's some of this ribbing here, this case ribbing that comes up into a boss, and that's in the way as well. There's not a lot in the way here because it's all open. But this boss here, this threaded boss there, there's a threaded boss there, and then anything on the case here, including the bosses around to the drain plug there. You're just checking all of that. So the way I went about it is with a basic angle grinder with a standard grinding disc, not a cutting disc but a grinding disc. This is a 5-inch or 125mm version. Battery is good because they're a little less torquey and a bit more control over them, I feel, than a power one, but power one will work fine. It's literally a matter of dropping it in the hole. I rest it on the case and I try and keep it somewhat flat, not tipping down and not angling up. So we're somewhat square, and it's just little bits at a time in the high spots. Take it out, keep checking, back with more. And then once you've got it pretty close, what I do is I just use this little flapper disc, abrasive flapper disc on a die grinder. You could use one in a drill or something, just to smooth all the edges out. No rough sort of gouges, high spots, sharp corners or anything. As much for, gouges and rough spots can actually be a start of a stress riser for crack propagation, but it's just good practice. You don't want any sharp bits in there anyway. It's just a matter of going slow and steady, little bits at a time, because you can always take more off. You can't put it back on if you take too much off. As far as depth or height is concerned, this wall here is not one thickness. There is a spot here where it's at its thickest, from there to there. The gear set runs just below that. That is pretty much 20 mil deep. So you can use that as a gauge for your thickness. So instead of coming right up under this edge, which is only 17 mil or so, you can leave a little bit more on those bolt bosses. Again, if you've got a set of verniers, you could set them up to this depth and then use them to check in there, and all your way around. The reason we want to leave more on is because, you know, for strength wise, as much as we can within reason, we still need that clearance. This is aluminium. You want, general rule of thumb is a minimum of 2 times the diameter in threaded depth. So if that's 8 mil or an M8, we want at least 16 mil of material for thread engagement, so these bolts don't pull or strip the threads. So for me, you know, I would feel more comfortable with 20 mil or, you know, 18 to 20 mil rather than the bare minimum 16. The bolts should not be an issue when you use the factory bolts to bolt this, the output housing on here. It contains the back end of the center diff. They shouldn't come through, but obviously when you're assembling it, just check that it's rotating, you know, and everything like that. So as you're going, you know, you can check it by putting the gear set inside and seeing how concentric it is to the hole and if it fits, because if it's up against something like that and over that side it's like that, it's not centralized. So that's a fairly easy way to get a gauge that it should be nice and centralized, but at the end of the day you are going to have to check fit it, and that's simply a matter of, I've got an old bearing here, so this makes it a lot easier, because what I've done is I've using the flapper disc on a die grinder is made this diameter inside here just a little bit bigger so the center diff can slip in and out. You know, if it's pressed on the center diff and you're reusing or whatever, that's fine. Well, actually, no, it's not, because you need to sit that down in there. So that's going to go down in there, and we're going to stack up the gear set as per you would for installation. So that is the high range gear and the bush that it runs on, and we've got it orientated with the dog teeth up as it would be in this case. Now I've got the case sitting on blocks here so the center diff can drop through, because it's not flush with the bottom. It needs to drop through a little bit. So we've got bearing, then the high gear and its bush. Then you will need the hub, the high-low selector hub that splines onto the center diff, and all you're doing is just eyeballing this for nice and concentric as best you can. The low range gear set with the dog teeth down as they would be, you need to slide in, and this is going to be a bit awkward without sliding everything around. Just on top of that, and again just eyeballing as best you can, everything to be concentric, as it'll find its way in with a bit of jiggling of the center diff, so that's pretty average but good enough. And then we'll grab our center diff. Now this is a bit hard one-handed, but we'll give it a go, and we will drop it in. A little bit of jiggle, the usual. Not quite in yet. There we go. So that's now sitting in the center diff as it would be, in the taper roller bearing down the bottom. We've got our high range gear here, our selector hub which is splined to the center diff so it doesn't rotate independently, it's fixed to the center diff. The high range gear can rotate, and the low range output gear can rotate as well. So you are now checking that all turns nice and freely and doesn't bind anywhere, and you can sort of look in around here and check your heights that nothing's running right down on top of the gear or very close to it. As far as checking the clearance on the inside, this is very hard. You cannot get in there. You can't really stick your phone in there and take a video. You know, you might have a little scope tool or something that you know you can see with, but most of us won't have that. One way that I use, and it's pretty easy, you might have some blue tack or some plasticine, something like that, Play-Doh. You can get a good bit of it and put it on your gear here. Now make sure it's not sticking up above the top of it, because it's going to bind and rub on this, and you can see how close the clearance that is there. But stick it on the tooth, and again, don't make it 5 mil proud, because you don't have that much clearance. But sort of go for 1 to 2 mil, at least 1 mil, and just gently turn the gear around and see if it spins all the way around, and if it doesn't, like I turned this way and I had it stop here. So I put a pen mark, I gently turn it around the other way, it cleared all the way around and it stopped here. I put a pen mark, and then all I do is pull this back apart and go, that's my high spot, go back in there with the grinder, gently dress it down, and then finish it off with the flapper wheel, reassemble, and it's just, again, bit by bit, slow process, slow and steady is going to win this one for you. You want to leave as much meat on the case as possible, but you make sure you've got the clearance on this gear set to give everything the best chance of not being an issue. Yeah, so pretty simple. The instructions are very clear and easy to follow. That's just a bit of a visual sort of thing. You know, we all like our little videos and stuff, makes it a bit easier sometimes. So hopefully that'll help any of you, and yeah, good luck. Cheers.